Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Thank you, Varangi. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Simple Living High Thinking, where we unpack the Bhagavad Gita every week. And I'm joined once again by Varangi, Radha Devidasi, and Tadeu Souza. And thank you guys for joining once again. We are in the middle of chapter 3. What do you guys want to talk about this week from last night's class?
Go ahead.
Last night's class was quite short in terms of Bhagavad Gita. We only covered 2 texts, right? But it was quite relevant to what's going on in the world today. Again, so now today, Bhagavad Gita class took place on June 5th of 2020. So Friday, June 5th of 2020. We are amidst a lot of protests because of the death of George Floyd, which started as protests in the United States in most major cities, but is now even internationally spreading to different countries and so on. So, and again, being June 6, 2020, we're still amidst the pandemic of the COVID-19. And these are 2 topics that are quite difficult to ignore in terms of worldwide events. So we did spend a lot of time in class yesterday discussing these topics and obviously how Bhagavad Gita relates to these topics, right? So that's where we stand in class. What are your thoughts, Varangi?
Well, yeah, thank you for putting some context into today's discussion or episode for those of you that are just joining us. And so one of the things that I mean, last night's class was brilliant. First of all, because most importantly, because it really highlighted the fact that the Bhagavad Gita and other spiritual texts in our tradition, they're actually so relevant, and they're relevant even thousands of years later. And that's really the proof of a tradition that actually is worth, stepping into and studying, something that was written thousands of years ago, but that can still be applied and implemented into today's life for everybody, is actually a tradition that's worth its salt. So I was really inspired by that concept. Also, something that, Tukram was explaining, the fact that, these protests are not just coming out of nowhere. They're coming from a history of abuse, of brutality, of taking advantage of people of less standing in society because of race. It really, we could open it up to gender, social class, economic class, anything. But specifically what's going on right now, it is stemming from the African American community. And so I thought that was really interesting, because we're dealing with something that specifically touches on the point of the skin disease, like we've heard it so much in our tradition, right? We're identifying with our bodies. We are thinking that other people are also just that, and we mistreat them. And this obviously also extends to animals and plants and, the planet, and so many issues that are happening, that have been happening forever, but we're finally being aware of, really come from that root problem, which is identifying with our body, with that which we're not. We're a part of it, as souls, we live in it, but that's not who we are. And so when I was listening to his class yesterday, I was thinking, wow, it really is so helpful to take a step back and look at the big picture and really avoid becoming myopic of, falling into that trap of us versus them. It's happening to them, it's not happening to me, or all police officers are so bad and all, African Americans are good, or, just that dichotomy. And I was appreciating the fact that we can read this text and really see something that connects us all, and see a little bit deeper than what's going on, and understand why these things are happening. And in a way, I really don't think that it's so one way or the other. There are so many nuances to what's going on. And similarly, the Bhagavad Gita has so many layers according to our own spiritual realization, according to how much time we have spent studying. We're able to really touch on different levels of depth on all of these verses. So I know you mentioned that we went through 2 verses last night, and those were 326 and 327. And although we didn't cover much ground in terms of how many verses we went through, we really didn't go into depth about those 2 specifically, and how these Vedic texts are actually timeless. And this will pass too, hopefully there will be some changes and we can progress and move forward as a human race and society, and everything will be great. But even if that doesn't happen, these teachings are still going to be there. These lessons are still going to be relatable. And it's really, I think, a call of action for all of us to start tapping into something deeper, to develop the change. It's so cliche, to be the change that we want to see in the world, in others, right? And so I guess I'll start with that.
What were your thoughts, Kim?
Yeah, I thought the topic was so timely for everything that's going on right now. I live in Long Beach, and the protests have been just literally blocks away from me. So there was one night where it was pretty hairy. I haven't lived near areas like that with a lot of political unrest, so I've been a little sheltered maybe. And yeah, I think it's interesting how Tukram Prabhu was able to point out that the Gita is so relatable today. His quote about, when everything else fails you, sacred wisdom doesn't, I thought was really beautiful. Just covering only 2 verses, they were so applicable to everything going on right now. And I noticed when I was getting a little nervous, when things were getting hairy around the neighborhood, it was a point of like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen, but it brought me closer to Christians in that, like, just that total surrender, like, I can't do anything right now. Please help. That sort of attitude.
Nice.
That's a really good point that you just brought up at the end. I think this is something that we had touched on other episodes, and also Tukram Prabhu brought it up. We had talked about the author Viktor Frankl, how he really touched on this point of how there's so many things that we don't have control over. And this is the verse 27, that we think by identifying with our body that we're, our false ego, that we have control over things, over everything. But there's actually, the only thing that we have control over is our reaction to what happens. And so to a spiritualist, it's not that bad things stop happening. They just react differently to the same events that are happening to everybody else. And I thought that was powerful. It's like, what other weapon would you want to get if you had that choice? Like, you can get like an AK, whatever. I don't know the names of the firearms, but like the best firearm ever, or like a big army, or a fortress, or all these things, or being completely anchored in spirituality to the point where you realize that you're not this, and you can actually always be Zen even through the worst of times and the best of times, because they're both bewildering, I think. It's amazing, right? It's like, oh yeah, I would like to cultivate that one. It's a lot harder, but it seems to be eternal. Nobody could take it away. And I thought that was really cool. So I just thought of that when you mentioned that, Kim.
You said something about being Zen even through the worst times. I just want to point out, even if you're being crucified,
No,
like
my
Lord Jesus
gosh,
Christ,
greatest example.
because that's a pretty bad time, and he's still praying for others who are torturing him in one sense, you know. So
Totally.
those are really good points. Now, as the only Black person in here, I must say something.
What?
And there is
We don't see color, Prabhu.
well, that's
I'm joking.
devotees, we try intentionally, but I think it happens unintentionally, to develop humility, right? Because we know it's a big part of our spiritual life. And sometimes we don't want to really admit if we have accomplished spiritual progress. We're like, oh no, but I'm still so low, I have so much to go. And that's there. I think there's a value. Humility is a huge lesson we all should have. But I think sometimes it's healthy to be actually aware, you know, where we are really in our spiritual life, and with the help of others and so on. And one thing that I can say, not from a braggadocious perspective, but I think it was in a spiritual accomplishment that I truly don't feel like a Black person. I really truly feel that I am a spirit soul, and which is quite independent from my current state in this Black body. However, it doesn't eliminate the facts or of my experiences of being in a Black body, right? Which was originally African Brazilian, and then now African American. And yes, the Gita is so interesting, it's so applicable. I want to start there. So expanding, so the first verse, 326, as to not disturb the mind of ignorant men attached to the fruit of results of prescribed duties, a learned person should not induce them to stop work. Rather, by working in the spirit of devotion, he should engage them in all sorts of activities for the gradual developments of Krishna consciousness. What Tukaram brought up from this point yesterday is that sometimes too much information can be too much for people. And it is better not to give too much, because we either paralyze a person to the point it's like, whoa, this is too much information. What do I do with all of that? Or they abandon the cause of spiritual progress altogether because they can't really digest it. So obviously our audience on this podcast, it doesn't belong to this group, because we are here trying to digest spiritual knowledge and philosophy and so on. So I think the information we share here is information that we are capable of digesting. So being African, right? So American, so that really means the United States. When people talk about being African American, they're talking about the United States of America. However, America does include South America, which is originally where I'm from, the first 18 years of my life, and then now here in the US for the past 20 plus. So I have had experiences of being in a Black body in both cultures. What they share in common is the slave route. Slaves came mainly from Africa to the US, Brazil, Jamaica, etc. And the culture is really robbed. These slaves, unfortunately, were treated like animals and developed an animal-like existence. They were robbed of their culture. They didn't have a proper language. They would get killed if they got caught reading, and etc. So it's really for many, many generations. You know, if you were born and your grandchild and a great-great-grandchild, and there's so many generations that go through that phase, you really get to a point where not only you're being treated like an animal, but your existence is animal-like. So then you get this Black bodies walking around South America, North America, and then we are now free. Well, but we are free from what? We don't have anything to do. There's no education, there's no discipline, there's no business knowledge, there's nothing to do. What are we left with? We are free in the sense that we don't have chains around us anymore, but what are we free to do? The society never really offer an alternative to that, you know? In fact, this is a big part of Malcolm X's philosophy, which differed tremendous from Martin Luther King's philosophy, which was integration, to integrate blacks with whites, was Dr. King's dream, where Malcolm X radically different. His philosophy was like, no, we can't integrate because the differences are too much. And in fact, we should go back to Africa, redeem ourselves, gain our culture back, gain our intellect, and then go anywhere in the world and be welcome and be a proper functional piece of society. So why am I saying all this? Because again, if you look at African Americans in Brazil and the US, you will identify the same behavior, which are black bodies coming from slavery, which is very unfortunate. And there is a type of behavior that is the same and is reflected in how you talk, in how you walk, in how you present yourself in society. Racism comes from there. Most people that are racist, yes, it's easy to say it's the skin color, but I would argue that it is beyond the skin color. It is about your behavior. The experience I have had of also being in Germany, for example, which is where my wife is from, and then seeing black people there, it is very different because the root of that black society is not slavery. These are people that are coming from Africa because they're being recruited to work in the German culture. These are people that are highly educated. They're coming to participate in businesses. They're coming to be a functional part of society, and they have never been robbed of their culture. They are African people, noble, with a lot of dignity, African people. And there's a big difference between these two black bodies walking around, where the discrimination, well, certainly there's other types of discrimination in Germany, especially against Jews in the past, but not against Africans. You won't see that. The way they dress Africans in Germany, which is the only country I've seen in Europe, the way they dress, the way they walk, the way they talk, how they participate in society is vastly different than Africans that come from slavery culture. So it's what we experience in terms of racism, I would argue, is a lot to do with behavior. And in my experiences, wanting to be a person that always better myself up, one thing that was always so clear to see to me is speech. That human beings, we are endowed with this amazing ability to speak. Well-articulated speech will take you so far. It's so cliche to mention President Barack Obama right now because we're talking about black bodies and the president of the United States, which is so unlikely, right? Like to become the president of the United States is a very extreme example, and I hate to pick on that. However, Barack Obama's ability to speak is such an amazing tool. And anyone that can articulate well-articulated thoughts will take anybody so far in life. And I would argue that one of the huge reasons why he was elected president of the United States is because he's one of the best speakers alive. It is a very powerful tool that should not be wasted. And if anything, I'm speaking directly to my brothers and sisters that are also in black bodies and pleading, begging, learn how to speak intelligently and properly, and racism will go down. People can discriminate against well-articulated, well-behaved people, no matter whether you are in a black body or any other color of body. You cannot be discriminated against if you have well-articulated and appropriate thoughts and words and actions. And if you are a healthy, functional part of society, you will not experience as much discrimination and racism as others that don't care about this point do experience. And I attest for myself. I have been welcomed in most places I've ever been. But I do have a very attraction to Tukaram because of his ability to speak and the spiritual lessons that he has to teach us. And anyways, so this is the part where this text comes in, right? So to not disturb the minds of ignorant people, like how much information is too much? Perhaps maybe even what I'm saying right now may be too much information for people who are thinking, no, but we don't have the opportunity. Some black bodies in ghettos don't have the same opportunity that the others do. Well, how about some of the other numbers that Tukaram was talking in class yesterday? I was actually bewildered by this. I didn't know. 9 million people die per year of starvation. 9 million is like a really big people. In a year, there's a lot of days there. So I wanted to break it down like Tukaram did. That means that there are 2,464 people that die from starvation per day. I mean, seriously? That means 102 people per hour. And that means 1.7 people per minute dying from starvation. And that there's a lot of souls trapped in black bodies suffering tremendous amounts of discrimination and racism, mainly because of behavior, speech, and actions, not necessarily the color of your skin. And Jews being massacred, right? And we speak all of this, it can be a lot of information. If we have to really meditate on these points and really internalize them in order to see what the point that I'm trying to communicate here is that there's a lot of stuff that we can control. But the things that we do, that we can't control, we should. And for example, to act in a civilized way is the best way the black people can have to help themselves not experience so much racism. And here comes what we were just talking about, right? At this part in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is saying, hey, we are not the bodies. So if I am not the body, and if I know that certain behavior will categorize me as a thug, as a person that will end up being discriminated against, why should I participate in that? If I'm spirit soul and I have nothing to do with this body, then all of a sudden I have so many alternatives. I have so much opportunity to then ask myself, what is the best way to live life? With peace, with love, with knowledge, with intelligence. I am not this body. I am not bound, therefore, to the cons. There are pros and cons to everything. I can very easily let go of the cons. To engage in violent speech is objectively not good. And unfortunately, a lot of black bodies speak in a way that categorizes themselves as people that will ultimately be discriminated against. So if we are not the bodies, if we are spirit soul, and if I'm in a black body, I still can choose to act in the best possible way. What is the best possible way? As a spirit soul, because that's our true eternal nature. And I'm hoping that this is not too much information and that we can truly understand that yes, Gita is applicable to throughout time, especially right now. And I'm not this body, I'm an eternal spirit soul. And simply by observing behavior of Africans from Africa in Europe, Africans in Brazil, Africans in the United States of America, myself included, I can so easily see it is about our behavior. And what we are aspiring for in a spiritual life is that we all behave as loving servants of God and of each other. And if we all do that, it is part of the Gita's eternal message, eternal way of solving the darkest problems that we are facing today. If we act like spirit souls, not as the temporary bodies that we are, we can definitively and once and for all solve all these problems. So that's my point number one.
Thank you for that perspective today. Yeah, it does seem a little overwhelming if you, depending on what perspective you choose. It was really interesting that, sorry, my dogs are going a little crazy. Depending on what perspective you choose of, you know, what your role should be, how do you get involved, how do you make change? And I thought that text 26 that you quoted was so applicable. Like, you know, some people it's going to be a little too overwhelming, so just let them go about their duty, do their work, and, you know, you, like Tukram Prabhu said last night, you stay in your lane. You find what's suitable for you and what you're good at, what speaks to you. And that sometimes when people have too much heat and too much passion and too much anger, they're not effective in what role they take. So, but I really appreciate your perspective, being a Black African-American man. So it's really valuable.
Yeah, and it certainly can be too much. And this is what I can attest for myself. For anybody who is wondering, how can I be better? Maybe if you are in a situation where you live in a poor area, in a less privileged area, and as a Black person, male or female, what can I do to better my life? What can I do to better my existence? Start by your speech, your ability to clearly articulate yourselves and your thoughts. And then, obviously, you know, spiritual life. But to just the way we speak to each other, it sends a clear message as to what our inner consciousness really reflects. Violent speech is only going to bring about violent reactions. And you can observe, I have collected data for 41 years now. You can observe there's a very clear pattern between speech and your position in society or how others see you. Again, I know it's a very bad example because it's very extreme and it is a Black man, but if you listen to Barack Obama speaking, if you listen to Malcolm X speaking, if you listen to Dr. Martin Luther King speaking, there's a difference there. And it's also, even in capitalism, you know, you make more money according to the number of words in your vocabulary. The more words in your vocabulary you have, there's a direct correlation. You make more money if you can speak better. And unfortunately, a lot of people that I spend so much time with, so many colleagues, teammates, African Americans, where purposefully it seems sometimes we are misusing English and speaking in a very poor way, especially when we're speaking about women and using terms that are not, like, we're just having a normal conversation. It becomes part of the accepted behavior. It's not even done with bad intention. I'm just referring to a female and it has to be through the B word. It's like, oh, that bee came over here and then she left. It's like, I'm not even mad. It's just like, it's just a normal conversation that we're having. Why? Why talk like that? Because when you're speaking like that in front of those that are discriminating you, you're just enhancing the reasons for why they are discriminating against you. So it will be the best step to get out of a bad predicament if you are in a Black body. Care about the way you speak, articulate yourself powerfully and clearly. We can go so far with that. And then obviously go into spiritual life.
Thank you. It's really nice to hear your perspective. I was actually hoping to ask you your perspective on just everything that's been going on, because I personally haven't heard from you directly. And so it's really helpful, because it's really just like, how does somebody that's committed to a spiritual practice in a serious way feel about everything that's going on today? And, you know, just in your whole life experience, because I know I was aware of your background. So it really helps with broadening, you know, that big picture from a spiritualist standpoint. Another thing that I appreciated was the fact that, and it's brought up on that verse, how the spiritualist understands knowledge. He has that knowledge, he or she has that knowledge, and he walks that talk, and he is really strict with himself, right? But at the same time, so lenient with other people. He understands where they're at and how much they can take. But at the same time, that person is always guided by truth. So it's not that the message is watered down, it's just that the management skills kick in, right? So like you said, having different skills to be able to make it in a different environment is it's actually very intelligent. As you know, I'm Colombian. I also switched cultures at a young age, and so many things. I agree with you. I think that we are very much responsible for a lot of the things that do happen to us, and a lot of it we are not. I mean, it's kind of beyond our control. And I say kind of because we have to take into consideration karma, which then really just brings it back to us and how our choices have reactions for many lifetimes. So even the bodies that we inhabit, we have chosen those bodies according to our actions, past actions. And so taking all this into consideration, I was appreciating your talk because I felt like, you know, with the outside world, and what I mean by that is the white man, and I know that sounds harsh or whatever, but that's how I've read it in the textbooks, and that's really what the whole world refers to it. The colonialist white man, the white man power, the white man that has come to oppress everybody else. And so when I say the outside world, and obviously that doesn't include every white person, because people that have a lighter skin color, some of them are really, a lot of them actually are really inclusive and loving and kind and just so deep, and they don't even see at that level. So I've been fortunate enough to come across those types of people. But for the purpose of this conversation and the scope of what's going on in the world, I'm just gonna label it as that. So that with the outside world, yeah, it's like we're fighting for justice, for equality, for respect, for really justice, like just on basic things, on like how the police treats everybody. They should treat everybody equally, how everybody should get paid equally for the same amount of job, for the same amount of work that's performed, and in the same, you know, circumstances. So many things, education, living situations, all these things. So with the outside world, yeah, we should, I think that everybody should be able to stand up and oppose something that's not going right. It's not like, well, I'm self-realized, therefore I'm not engaging in the world, and sorry if you're getting plowed by a stronger person or a higher person or anything like that. I think that the spiritualist does step in with knowledge and understands how he can help the least privileged. But I'm connecting everything. What you just stated really sounded to me like the other side of that coin, which is, okay, this is the way we could act or should act, or it's helpful to act outside. Like, yeah, we should defend, we should protect, we should stand by the truth always, we should oppose things that are not good. But internally, in our in-group, in our family group, we're going to talk about how we need to up our game, how we need to clean up our act, how we need to really start walking a better path, how there's no excuses, and how we can't give our power over or value over to other people. We have to be able to figure out a way that we become worthy of respect, of equality, of justice, of all these other things that we're asking other people or requesting from other people. Do we do that for ourselves first? Do I do it for myself first? How do I treat myself? How am I talking to myself? How am I talking to my family members? How am I talking to my community? How, you know, so little by little we expand, then that fight or that plight outside actually becomes a real valuable thing. Otherwise, it's just a hypocritical game where you're expecting other people to fix your life when you haven't even cared enough to fix your own. And I thought that was really wonderful and valuable. I really respected that perspective, and it really shows a reality that can be ignored. And I agree with you. I think it's something hard to hear. I think that a lot of people might not understand it because we are accustomed as people to be the victims. It's so much easier to victimize ourselves, to sit back and be like, well, it's them, they're the bad guy. And then you're not willing to look at yourself, right? To sit in front of that mirror and say, well, what am I doing that I'm furthering this disrespect or this lack of justice or this lack of whatever? Having said all this, of course, nobody should be treated the way that we have seen the Black community be treated. And it's not just the Black community, it's the Latino community, it's the Asian community, it's the Middle Eastern community. Actually, a lot of people in the white community are also very affected by racism in a different way. I see it all the time from other minority groups being racist towards white people as well. And so if we're going to talk about this, it really can't be about one race getting it together and fixing everything for another race. It's really just all understanding that we're not these bodies. We're not segregated by race. We will never be, because we're actually spirit souls. And so we should actually focus a little bit more on who we truly are than spend all this time and energy figuring out how we can make the other people fix our lives based on something that we're not. I mean, it really is actually bewildering when we look at it that way. And so I appreciate your courage to share your perspective. It's not easy to say things that may not be popular, but at least to me, those are the words that that really transform me. And it's so refreshing to hear from somebody, you know. Our prime example is Tukram, and you're totally following in his footsteps. He is not afraid to really put the finger on the wound and really point to, let's look at the big picture and let's see what your side of the story is, and yeah, what everybody else also has to do. But ultimately, that's what we're trying to do in our spiritual practice, is to turn those lenses inside and see, well, where do I need to do some work? And then by doing that, naturally everything else around us will change, will improve, or will degrade, depending on what road we choose to take. And so yeah, thank you for sharing your perspective and for allowing me to share my analysis of it and a little bit of my own experience. So this was really valuable for me.
Yes, of course. And, you know, I am quite passionate about this topic because, like I mentioned, at the end, what matters is that there is justice and that there is equality, and that people who want to better themselves are given an opportunity to. And that's what I've done a lot throughout the years, and even gotten myself into some dangerous situations sometimes where, like, you know, some of my teammates didn't really appreciate hearing from me what I had to say. But I'll give a practical example of a conversation that I had before with a pretty thuggish teammate I had at one point, who was saying that, well, but you and I were raised differently. You had opportunities that I didn't. You had a father and you had a mother. I didn't have a father and a mother. My role models were the drug dealers around the corner, and that's who I hung out with. And the main cause for this is because I didn't have a father. And if I had a father, then I would have had better opportunities. And I can understand that. That's certainly a fact. That's certainly true. However, this same person that I was having this conversation with was currently, at that point, father of 3 different children in 3 different states by 3 different women. So what are you doing to stop that cycle? What are you doing to not only provide yourself a better life, but for the life of your children? Because you are not there in the life of your children. So they are going to suffer the same discrimination that you're suffering. They're going to get shot like you did. And when it's up for you to take responsibilities to change. And I've had these exchanges many times, and what I then realized, okay, but what can I do to help, right? I can have these conversations with people that are willing to engage in these conversations with me. And I noticed that the best I can do is to really provide an alternative, like, you know, clear speech. proper behavior. And it starts with what we are doing in spiritual life. Prabhupada is on national television when he was asked by the reporter, what is your mission? He said the mission is to bring about an understanding of God in human beings. Because if a human being does not understand who is God and love him, then he's an animal. Because then we are eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And if we are just eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, then we're just animal. If we don't know who is God and we don't love him, and we just eat, sleep, mate, and defend, Prabhupada says, then we're animals. So where do we start? Okay, the vows that we were talking about in previous podcasts. No illicit sex, no intoxication, no meat eating, no gambling. These are material principles that cause you to embrace a spiritual life. Just that in itself, the speech that I'm talking about here, so the bad speech, the speech that causes people to discriminate against you, is so much enhanced by intoxication itself. It is at that point that you really start speaking bad. And it is at that point, through intoxication, that we go and start fathering children that we're not going to take care of. That means illicit sex, right? So I'm not this body. I don't have to continue with this behavior, which obviously is bringing about bad reactions. Because if I got shot because my father wasn't there, then what's going to happen to my son since I'm not there? It's so obvious to see. So if I am not this body, and if I'm a spirit soul, and I use my intelligence to ask, then what is the best possible outcome? What is the purpose of my life? Then I am giving all these choices. And Prabhupada has helped us a lot, and many bona fide spiritual leaders have helped us. And it starts with sobriety. It starts with truthfulness. It starts with responsibility and honor, clear speech, a helpful, functional member of society. Who is going to discriminate against such a person? After all, we do live in capitalism. And if you are a person who brings intelligence, clear speech, good, sober, and ethical behavior to the table, anybody would hire you. You think Googles and Facebooks and Microsofts or Teslas would not hire you because you are in a black body? If you are an intelligent person who can clearly articulate your thoughts and behave according to a moral human behavior? Of course not. This is capitalism. They want you because you're going to help them make money. And that's capitalism here would win against racism. So it is up to us to it's 2020. We have the internet. This is what we're doing. The outreach we're doing here right now is to provide a spiritual alternative. We can see people like Barack Obama, Malcolm X speaking, articulating themselves, behaving in a way that is helpful. And then obviously, and hopefully, everything culminates into a spiritual desire, into an awakening that goes beyond the body and the mind and the skin color and all of that temporary stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'm done. Renzo.
No, I don't want you to be done. We're needing to wrap up here soon, so I'm going to ask you guys for any closing thoughts you have. But I love this conversation. I love the raw honesty of it. And yeah, like you guys both said, it might be hard to hear. I really appreciated in text 27, I'll just read that briefly. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. And so Tukram Prabhu had such an interesting point about that. And I'm just going to quote him because I can't say it better, but so much of what happens in life is karma. You can't actually change it. You can change how you respond to it, but you can't change it. So this part, your freedom consists of how you're going to deal with stuff. Really made an impact on me. Like that's true freedom right there, where whatever happens in life, how you respond to it, doing your duty, going about your life and not being attached to the results. That is like ultimate freedom. You know, you can't change what's going to happen to you for the most part. but you can change how you're going to react to it. And so I thought that was really poignant.
Yeah, it's a great point. Like, I'm sorry, I'm gonna go back. So the spirit so bewildered thinks himself the doer, right? So much of the attitude too is like, I'm from the ghetto, I'm gonna live and die in the ghetto, I'll never live here. And if you live here, you are selling out, you are sell out. Like, I'm gonna stay true to my ghetto. I'm not gonna live in my corner. And I'm thinking, I'm doing this, right? I'm the doer. I'm choosing to stay true and thugged out and that kind of language and so on. But what are we saying here? That in actuality, these activities are being carried out by the three modes of material nature. Now, guess what? The three modes of material nature does not have a concept of African American or Latin or Asian or anything. It is just you acting according to, like, even the previous verse, right? That we are forcibly acting according to the qualities we acquired from the modes. So really, this passion and this ignorance is coming from the modes. But if we choose, like you said, Kim, to react, okay, I am in this condition, but I am no longer going to partake in it. I'm going to navigate towards the mode of goodness. That's going to take me out from passion and ignorance, which ignorance manifests as racism and discrimination. And so does dark passion. So yes, we do have the choice. How do I react to this less than fortunate situations? Well, I would choose to then start acting in the mode of goodness.
Wonderful. I agree with Kim. This has been an awesome conversation. I'm so glad we had it. And just to wrap up, I think it's important to remember just the context of these two texts that we went through yesterday. Krishna's then has taken a step back and is telling Arjuna how a person, even with materialistic desires, can make progress in spiritual life, and how that's so relevant to our process, a global process today. How it doesn't matter where we're at, if we're in the ghetto, if we've come out of it, if we're at the top, if we're making a lot of money or not enough, or whatever it is, that whatever we are engaging in, or as long as we're doing our duty, but then offering that result to something higher than us, to a cause greater than us, for a higher purpose, for a bigger yes, then gradually we're moving forward. That will eventually lead us to understand that everything comes from one source, and that source is Krishna, and how there's no better boss out there than the source of it all, than Krishna, and how he's the only one that will not rip you off, that will not exclude you, that will not segregate against you, that will not discriminate against you. And you come to understand that everything that we do in this world is also temporary, and we do what's part of our nature because it's our duty, because that's what we have chosen through our free will and karma, but that eventually we should transcend that, which is a previous verse that we went through. And so Krishna is telling Arjuna, yeah, you should also become a perfect being, and after you become perfect, you continue doing your duty to set an example for other people. You don't just check out. And so we hear in these two verses that we covered yesterday how Krishna is telling Arjuna, and even if you encounter somebody that doesn't get it yet, your duty is not to make them quit that work or that action. It's just your duty is to find a way to engage them. So it's so amazing how our tradition is so focused on uniting everybody, including everybody. It's not like, okay, you can't be a part of our tribe, get away because you're not at this level. It's like, yeah, come wherever you're at, we'll find a spot for you, which is what my teachers did for me, and this is what we're trying to do for other people that are just coming around through this podcast. So this beautiful lesson of being strict with ourselves, trying to live a life of honesty and integrity and character, and then being really helpful and kind with other people that want to develop that but are not there yet, and that eventually they will get to that perfect stage. And so we'll see how in the next few verses that we haven't covered yet, Krishna's going to give a little more information about what these two people look like. Somebody that has already this knowledge and it's engaging other people that don't have it yet, and the difference between them. Although externally, both types of people are engaging in the same thing in the world, the internal mentality is so different. And so also this ties into our today's conversation, because we could be, you know, standing up for peace, for happiness, for justice, for equality, for all these things, right? But at the same time, internally, if we have been cultivating spirituality, we will also understand the reality of this world, how we're not gonna get lost and swept away by the trendiness of even the protest or what's going on right now, but really be able to see things clearly, and guide others through that right path, as opposed to just going with the crazy mob wherever somebody else blind is leading us, you know. And so I just wanted to bring us back to that context, because it's not done here. So it's really amazing how Krishna's going to give more examples, more details about the differences between these two people internally, the internal difference. So the attachment is there for both, but the spiritualist is attached to something higher, beyond the skin, beyond the body, and the materialist is attached to the fruits of his labor, to one result that he wants or she wants, but that is not anchored on truth or reality. And so I just wanted to wrap it up on that point. And just, yeah, this was great. I'm so excited that we got to touch on these important points and really see how much Krishna is so brilliant and how he just has this is a perfect panacea for everything that we could ever experience in this world, good and bad. And so, yeah, thank you both for this space and your time.
Thank you. Very nicely articulated, Varangi. And yes, it is the ultimate solution for so many of the problems, all problems, through time. It's being tested through time, and it's a perfect solution. Everybody should be inspired about what you said.
All right, well, thank you guys, and thank you everybody. And I meant to mention this earlier, but if anyone wants a Bhagavad Gita, feel free to contact us. Our website, simplelivinghighThinking.net, or through any of the social media sites, and I will send you one. Or if you want to donate to the temple, buy a book, and those donations go to the temple. You can, in any description, we have the link to the online bookstore for our temple. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for joining us on Simple Living, High Thinking. Please subscribe, as new episodes post every Monday. You can tune into this podcast live every Saturday at 3 p.m. Pacific Time. Check out our website for more details at simplelivinghighThinking.net. And if you would like to nominate someone for a devotee spotlight interview, contact us via our website at simplelivinghighThinking.net.